All right, everyone. Welcome to the Qualitative Dissertation Template webinar. It's Tuesday, 3 o'clock, well, actually 3:05 Arizona time. And the purpose of this presentation is to cover our new version 9.0 dissertation template with a focus on the qualitative template. First, I want to thank everybody here for attending, all of you that are joining us from all over the country and likely some folks that are international as well. We're really happy that you're here today and taking time out of your schedule to be with us. I also would like to thank the panelists that are here with us today. We have Dr. Michelle Sandoval. She's driving our presentation today and helping with all the technical management. Dr. Patricia Chess is my co-presenter today. Actually, she's the main presenter. I'm the co-presenter. I'm just taking some of the first few slides. We have Dr. Linda Garrett. Dr. Garrett is one of our research faculty managers here in the College of Doctoral Studies. And by the way, Dr. Chess is a dissertation program chair, and her responsibility is to oversee all of the peer review process that you all will encounter through your dissertation milestones. And so she has tremendous insight into that process, and also has been instrumental in helping to put this template together for both the qual and quant versions. And then we also have Dr. Rudy Garcia with us today. Dr. Garcia is also one of our research faculty managers. And we have Brian Longcar, soon to be Dr. Brian Longcar, we hope, soon. And he's also a research faculty manager here in the college. And our research faculty managers do a tremendous amount of learner support and provide some additional resources and support around the work that you all are doing in your dissertation process. And then finally, we have September Weeks here, and she is also a part of our team as the peer review administrator for our group, a research specialist. And we're very happy that she's with us, and she's our APA expert as well. So we're excited to have her here to potentially answer any APA questions. My name is Dr. Cynthia Bainbridge. I am an associate dean here in the College of Doctoral Studies, and I've been here for almost over 10 years and have been part of helping to develop all of the various resources and templates and sort of infrastructure to support you all in this complicated dissertation process. So very excited to be here today and to hot off the press roll out our new dissertation template. It was posted yesterday on the DC network, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. What you see here on this initial slide is some guidelines around our webinar, and we found this structure works really well for all the other webinars that we've been hosting in the past few months. Lots of questions about, will this webinar be posted, and will the PowerPoints be posted? And yes, they will. So as soon as we get closed captioning onto the recording, we will post the webinar, and also we will make sure that the PowerPoint as a standalone document is also available for you in that dissertation template folder so that you can access that and review it. You probably have already figured out that the video and audio is disabled for all of you on the other side, with the exception of our webinar panelists, and we do that to help keep everything manageable. The other important item here is that the chat button, which I know many of you use frequently in other webinars and things like that, because we have such a big group, it's hard to keep track of questions and comments and things like that because it goes so quickly. So we've disabled the chat button and the hand raise feature. So if you have questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, or the Q&A icon. Click on that, and you can post your question there. We have time specifically allocated at the end of our webinar here to try to address as many questions as we can. Also, our panelists will be helping to address some of those questions along the way, and hopefully the presentation will cover most of what you're looking for in terms of questions around the template. Really important to ask questions today that are relevant to the topic, our webinar topic today. We all know that you have questions about process or residencies or coursework or things like that, or methodologically specific to your study. And because, again, we have a short period of time, a small group, we want to stay focused. And we have lots of resources on the DC. We have office hours that you can attend for peer review, which can help with some of the methodological questions that you may have. That's posted here as the last bullet on the screen. It's every Thursday at 10:30 a.m. And if you go to the home page on the DC network, you'll see the Zoom link there. Really recommend that you jump into that. So again, everything will be posted on the DC as soon as we can get it processed and rendered. And with that, we'll just move on to the full-on presentation. So Michelle, you want to jump to the next slide, which I've already pretty much presented, which is the title of our presentation today. And again, I just want to do a shout out to Dr. Sandoval, Dr. Wallerschmidt, Dr. Chess for the extensive work that they have put into getting these dissertation templates ready and posted on the DC network. Next slide. Okay, so some of the key things that we're going to cover today. I'm just going to spend a few minutes to make sure you all know where to find the template and associated documents. I'm going to talk about the time period for transitioning to the new template. That it seems to be obviously one of the biggest concerns. We all know that, you know, many of you are mid-stride in the process, and we want to make that transition. We want to give a wide berth for that and to make that transition as easy as possible. We'll be covering what's new in the template, including front matter, the chapters, the appendices, which are technically called the back matter. And we'll also do a quick review of some of the key things, the APA 7, or the new APA 7 guidelines for writing your dissertation. And then we'll finish up with a Q&A. So Michelle, next slide. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes on this kind of the housekeeping items around the template, and then Dr. Chess is going to step in and get into the specifics for the chapters. So to locate the template, go to the DC network and click on Dissertation Resources and Folder 5. I know many of you have already been there, spent time looking around, but that is where you'll find the new template. And I have a screenshot on the next slide. What you see there is our new qual and quant templates in the folder that is the version 9 folder under dissertation templates. And the big ticket items here that I just wanted to cover in terms of what's in the templates or what's different, and we'll go into more specifics, is that we've really streamlined chapters 1 and 2 and removed a number of sections that were redundant to chapters 3, 4, and 5. So that's probably the most relevant thing for all of you, is really making sure that those redundancies were cleared out. We've streamlined those other, all of the chapters and enhanced the information specifically in 3, 4, and 5 to make sure that you have the information you need to be successful in writing those chapters. We've also aligned the 10 strategic points, same document, but just a little bit more specifics related to qualitative and quantitative. So those are split as well, if you choose to use them that way. And one of the big questions is, do we have a proposal template? And we do not. We want you to use the dissertation template and build out your proposal using the first 3 chapters of the template. And the reason for that is because if we have 2 dissertation templates and 2 proposal templates, you can imagine how hard it is to keep track of updating those documents, and as a doctoral learner as well, making sure you're using the most current versions and things like that. So we'll have 1 qualitative dissertation template, 1 quantitative dissertation template. You write your proposal right into the dissertation template, and then you can share that with your committee members if they want you to delete out the unwritten sections or chapters 4 and 5 or whatever. You can work that out with them, but use the one template. It will serve you all well to do that. Also, we've updated some of the core designs, our core designs for qualitative and quantitative methodology, and we've embedded that information within the templates for your reference as well. And of course, one of the other questions that everybody will be asking are the defense PowerPoints for the proposal and the dissertation. Will those be updated? And yes, they will. We will work on those, although generally those should stay mostly the same. There might be some minor tweaks to that. So, those are some of the key things that we want you to know. If you jump to the next slide, Michelle, you'll see that we have, this is just a quick screenshot. And what I wanted just to point out is and I'm a little bit cropped here. Let me see if I change my, I'm not sure if you all can see the full screen or not.
We just see the top arrow there, Cindy.
Okay. Maybe, I'm not sure, Michelle, if you can make that a little bit smaller on your side.
No.
All right. Well, so there we go. You can kind of see down below here, we have, this is the folder, it's folder 5 where the dissertation templates are. And I just had highlighted where the 10 strategic points document, the update to the qual and quant 10 strategic points. The original 10 strategic points are also still located in that folder. And then if you look down below, you'll see the dissertation template. And I can't see this on my screen, not sure if you can, but underneath the version 8 folder is the dissertation template version 9. And that is where you will find documents, your documents for the qualitative template, the quantitative template. And as we post the webinars and additional resources, we'll be posting that information as well in that folder. All right. So there we go. I think you can see it on that screen. Okay. All right. We can jump to the next slide. All right. This is one of the biggest questions that we have from doctoral learners. Well, I'm already working in version 8 and now you're going to make me transition to version 9. Well, that's not true. We're not going to make you transition to version 9. I think when you all look at the template, you're going to want to transition because you'll see how streamlined and nice it is to use. But for those learners who have been accepted into level 2 review, right, and assigned a reviewer by January 29th, 2021, all right, you can continue to stay in your version 8 template. So if you're in level 2 review or level 5 review and you've already, you're in those reviews by the end of January, you can continue to use that version 8 template through the completion of your dissertation, okay? So that's really important. And if you have not been assigned a level 2 reviewer by the end of January, then we really, really recommend that you change over to that version 9 template. In fact, you really should try to change over if you're working on your proposal now, and we'll have some comments about that in just a minute about how easy it is to transition. But again, if you're working in the version 8 template, you want to stay in the template, and you know that you're going to get into level 2 or level 5 by January, end of January, you are more than welcome to stay in the current template. And frankly, if you have a compelling reason to stay in that template after that point, we will listen to sort of those as well. I mean, the important thing here is that the information in the templates are actually pretty consistent between version 8 and version 9. It's just that the version 9 has it's more streamlined, it's easier to use, and there's some additional clarity around certain sections that we'd like to have you be writing to in your particularly in chapters 4 and 5. The other question we have is around APA, and APA, the version 8 template uses APA 6th edition, so you can certainly stay in APA 6th edition as part of that template. Some of you may have already made changes into APA 7, so if you've already done that, that's fine. And just so you know, we have set the version 9 template to the APA 7th edition. All right, next slide. So I've pretty much covered everything on this slide. And so again, we've split the template into qualitative and quantitative. That helps to just clear up any confusion around certain sections that should remain in the template versus what is specifically focused on your methodology. We've had some confusion around that. We've added information in the front matter, meaning the beginning pages of the dissertation. We've added important additional appendices that we need to see as part of your data collection and analysis, etc. I mentioned earlier that we'll no longer have a separate proposal template. We'll use the current dissertation or the version 9 template with chapters 1 through 3. And really what we've also done is we've added a lot of help comments into the various sections. They're bubble comments, what we call them. And so hopefully those will be helpful for you as you move through writing your dissertation. Next slide. All right, so I'm just going to spend a couple minutes chatting about what's in the front matter and why it's important for all of you here on the webinar to really take a look at what's in that material. The very first page of the template is actually instructions for using the template, and we have important general information and guidelines in a narrative format that really gives you useful instructions regarding requirements, formatting, how to use Word, the styles tool in Word. We want to make sure that you have the right information to be able to work effectively within the template. One of the biggest things that happens is our learners will they'll copy and paste their content into the template and they'll delete the headers. We don't want you to delete those headings and subheadings because they are all styled to make sure that that information comes across in the table of contents. So really read through that general instruction section, or the first 2 pages of the template. And then we also have a list of 15 really important items that we feel are critical to be successful in using the template. And I'm not going to go through all 15 of those items. That's the fun of getting to review a new template for all of you. But they're very important items, and hopefully will help you in terms of your document management and how to effectively write within the template so that it's a successful experience for you. So those instructions are important. We also have included, at the request of a number of our chairs and peer reviewers and committee members, that the 10 strategic points be included as part of the template in the front part of the dissertation. And the reason we do that, and they've requested that, is because it's a bulleted sort of a short, quick way for your committee to review your study and to make sure that that you're continuing to work on alignment and that it's a quick reference point for them. So you need to keep that 10 strategic points in your dissertation as really the front page of your dissertation for your committee, because it's a great reference for them, and it also helps you as you kind of work through changes in your dissertation. And if you've modified something in your dissertation, then you can go back to your 10 strategic points and say, oh, did I address that here, here, or here, right? So it's very helpful from that perspective. We've updated the Dean's signature page, and we'll let you take a chance to review that. It just has an approval statement by committee members, and we feel like that's really important as part of our commitment to you as a doctoral learner and support that the committee members provide to you. We've included one of the biggest sections. I'm going to take just a moment and talk about the abstract. One of the most important pages in your dissertation is the abstract. It is really literally the first thing that other scholars will read. They will pull up your abstract and really determine, well, do I want to spend the next hour or 2 hours reading your dissertation? They want to see what information is in your abstract that's relevant to their study or their research, or why it's important to them to read your dissertation. So we've added some information in the abstract in the narrative of the abstract, as well as in the help bubbles, to make sure that you write up a really strong abstract that includes the right information. So I think those are the main things. We also, in a list of tables and list of figures, we've added a couple examples of how to do a proper table in APA and a proper figure in APA. And I think those are kind of the main things that we want to present in terms of the front matter. Everything else remains unchanged. as far as the other pages like the dedication and those kind of things. Dr. Sandoval, next slide. Okay. So I just mentioned those 15 critical items, and these are the general instructions that you see in the narrative regarding, you know, as a learner reviewing those every section in the dissertation and the chapter, using the criteria tables, addressing each of the criterion within the criteria tables in an authentic way in terms of the quality of your own work. And then also our faculty and committee members know that they are using those criteria tables for assessment and feedback. So as you move through your dissertation, if you go to the next slide, Dr. Sandoval, you will see this is an example of a criteria table. That format has not changed from the prior version of the template. You'll see that there's a place for you to score yourself, for your chair to provide a score, for the methodologist to provide a score in the appropriate chapters, and the content expert to provide a score in the appropriate chapters. So if the content expert, for example, is not in chapter 3, we don't expect that expert or content expert to really go through and score it. We know that they will typically review it, but that's really your chair and methodologist for chapter 3. So you'll see those X's in the criteria table. So I think with that, again, this table remains consistent from each version. Although I would like to say that be careful and make sure you read those criteria table, because they have been updated with some more specific information depending upon how those sections have been updated or added. Okay, so it's important to review each of those criteria to make sure that you're meeting the requirements for that section. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dr. Chess. And then hopefully we'll get some time here at the end to answer some questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Cindy. So as Dr. Bainbridge has said, we have made a number of changes to Chapter 1 in the new version 9 template. And mainly it's a smaller Chapter 1 because we've removed a number of things. And so it's a little bit tighter. And what we're removing is a lot of repetition, which I'm sure you'll all be very grateful for. So we have a total of 5 sections, which are listed here. As a note, as we go through these slides, when you see purple bolded text, that indicates that we've done something new in the template. So that should provide a visual guide to you as to where we've made changes. Having said that, we have made enhancements throughout, but the more significant changes are in these sections that we've made purple and bolded. So those are the ones that I'm going to focus on as I go through these slides. So on the anticipated limitations, what limitations are limitations inherent to a methodology and a design. So if you have chosen a phenomenological design, what is a limitation of that particular design? It may be that it's not casting it, you're not going to get a case out of it because it's not looking at and making a case. You're looking at going into some depth around meaning around a phenomenon. So what we're wanting to focus on here in anticipated limitations is for you to do some thinking in this phase of your work, in the planning of your work, as to what you expect limitations are that are inherent to methodology and design. So it's really getting you thinking about what are the advantages of what I'm doing, what are the potential limitations to this approach. Another new section in Chapter 1 is that we have inserted an alignment table as well as a project timeline. Now, the alignment table might be something that you're all very familiar with. It's being used in some classes. It's really a visually a way of expressing some of the relationships that you also see in the 10 key points, but doing it in a kind of a visual way. And for some reason, that provides new information, a way of looking at the relationships with what you have. So for example, what is a gap that you may have identified? What are the what are the research questions? What is the design? What are the associated key questions that you'll be asking? So it's giving you yet another opportunity to look at how your key statements that are really key sections of the research are aligned with one another. And then of course a project timeline is for you to be able to produce a plan of how you anticipate this work will be carried out and over what period of time. Next slide, please, Dr. Sandoval. So what did we take out of chapter 1? We took the problem statement out and moved it to chapter 2. We moved the purpose to chapter 3. We moved the research questions to chapter 3. We rethought the advancing scientific knowledge and significance sections and put them into a new section in chapter 2. And we replaced, as I noted a moment ago, a section on assumptions, limitations, and delimitations, and having you focus just on anticipated limitations. And the question is, why would we do this? In part, is because we wanted to reduce repetition. And the second reason, and really a stronger reason, is that why would we have you put everything in chapter 1 when you haven't yet developed what you're covering in the literature, what your key questions are, what are the patterns that you found in the literature, all of which produce, this is how I'm going to go approach my own work. So it is located in a way that flows more logically from the discussions and argumentation that you will do in those later chapters. Next slide. Now in chapter 2, you can see from the bolded purple parts that we have some new information. So we have elaborated background for you in the intro and background section. Probably the biggest new part of chapter 2 is what we call the identification of the problem space. This is a replacement essentially for what in version 8 is called the identification of the gap. Now these are highly related. What the identification of the problem space really does is have you think about how do you approach the literature, how do you understand what we call the problem space, which is the space in which this topic that you're looking at has been approached by other researchers. How has it been approached methodologically? How has it been approached in terms of design? How has it been approached theoretically? What empirical studies have been done? And so you're essentially circling around in the literature to get at what is quote, the gap. What we're referring to this now is how has all the current work, the published work that you're reading, what has come to be understood about the topic that you're working on, and what is not yet understood. So we want to encourage you to think about what is not yet understood rather than thinking of, quote, the gap. They're in a way sort of the same thing, but we want to encourage you to deepen your thinking, give you something concrete to look at, and really ask yourself, what do I think people have said that have become understood, and what hasn't? And that's where you're going to target your study. In the theoretical foundation section, we have added some direction essentially for you. On the first, we've provided some clear information about key building blocks and a whole section on steps to take to develop this section. And we've also aligned it with an updated version of the ebook that was developed for RES 861. So as we're moving forward, as we continually develop and improve curriculum and all the work in our college, we're always looking to stay as aligned as we can. In the review of the literature section, in many ways, this section is substantially the same, but as you'll see also on the next slide, which don't go there quite yet, there's been a section at the end of version 8 in chapter 2 on methodology and instrumentation. The intent of that section was to discuss in the key studies that you reviewed in chapter 2 in the lit review, what methodologies were used and what instruments were used. But there was a lot of confusion about that. And so we've pulled it out of that section and we've moved it. And the problem statement is now in chapter 2. And as noted a moment ago, you're now going to build your problem statement based on the work that you're doing in the problem space, which is based on the empirical studies, the lit review, and the theoretical foundations. Next slide. So noted already, the gap section has been replaced with the problem space section, the identification of the problem space, and we've moved that methodology and instrumentation section to chapter 3. Next slide. Chapter 3, and I don't see the entire slide here, Dr. Sandoval, so I see a portion of it. I assume everybody else does too. So again, looking at the bolded purple sections, you'll see that the purpose of the study in version 9 of the template shows up in chapter 3 for the first time. It used to also be in chapter 1. But as I was just noting, what we're really having you do is build your understanding, demonstrate your understanding, and review of the literature, your discussion of the theory, and the purpose really emerges out of all of that. The population and sample section, and this is cut off for me, Dr. Sandoval. I don't know if you can make this a little smaller.
I'm trying to fix it.
Thank you. So while we had this, while this is the same section that we had in version 8, we have provided some enhanced information that's focused on qualitative studies. And that's really what we want to be able to equip you with as you are working through a qualitative template for a qualitative study. We've done the same thing in the sources of data section. We've split it up a little bit to give more explanation about what can go into sources of data and how you can structure that section. The trustworthiness section is unchanged. In data collection and management, data analysis procedures, again, we have enhanced these sections. So there's not, we've got some subsections in there to help guide you as you develop your thinking. And what you should keep an eye out for when you go through these sections is further explanation and clarification of what we expect in these sections. And on the assumptions and delimitations, again, we kind of had this in a few places before, but in this case, we're looking for you to have a good discussion of this in chapter 3. We took it out of chapter 1. Next slide.
Is this better?
Yes. I just wanted to, Dr. Bainbridge noted at the beginning that chapters 3, 4, and 5 have not really been substantially restructured. They've mostly been enhanced. And so we're no longer looking now at what's not in these chapters, but what is in these chapters and where you can find the updated information. Now, what's particularly important in chapter 4 is what we're calling the changes and updates from the original research plan. Now, a lot of you may have heard me say my favorite saying, which is no plan survives its collision with reality. And if the plan is your first 3 chapters of the proposal, your collision frequently happens in data collection. And so you may not have achieved the sample size that you thought you would have. You may have gone to data collection and you had site permission, and lo and behold, something happens and you no longer have site permission, and now you have to go do something else. You expected that you would have interview questions, and you thought that they would produce, you know, tremendously robust information, and people were answering barely at all. What do you do? How did you adapt in the process of data collection? So when you hit chapter 4, we want you to discuss this. We're not going to ask you to go back and update everything in chapters 1 to 3. That's your plan. We're saying this is what happened. It's what I call describe the collision. This is what happened. This is what I did. This is how it's different from the original research plan. This is why it's different from the original research plan. And we think this is a very important section because I think every researcher here will tell you this is something that just plain happens. So we want to have you prepared, and we want to give you a section here in the template where you can have an opportunity to really discuss this. I just want to add that this is a very important part of conducting research. If you are reading studies now and you found something of, this is what went wrong, this is what I thought would happen, this is what I had to do, that gives you a greater understanding of what happened in the study. It also increases trustworthiness tremendously. And it's very helpful for other researchers to say, oh, here are some red flags I could potentially look out for or try to be prepared for as best I can. So it's very useful, not only for authentic reporting of what actually occurred in your own experience in conducting the research and then analyzing the research, it is also valuable to the larger scholarly community. The next section is preparation of raw data for analysis and descriptive data. We've combined these sections and they now have subsections. We think it's very important prior to your going through the data analysis procedures is for you to describe in detail how you actually prepared your raw data. We're going to want to see the raw data uploaded to the DC network. I just want to add from an IRB perspective that that as your professors, people who are educating you in the process, as faculty in the university and the college, we all can see the data. It's still confidential, it's still protected, even if we look at it. And we want you to be able to take a good hard look at your raw data and say, this is how I prepared it. So I transcribed my 20 interviews and I uploaded them to MaxQDA, and then I did this and I did that, and you describe all the steps that you took getting ready to analyze the data. Very, very important step. Very important in Chapter 4. And very important part of a research process with integrity. The descriptive data section focuses on essentially a profile of what you actually pulled together as your data set. So you would have tables in here such as these are the participants, participant A, B, C, D, E. So-and-so had so many interviews or participated in focus groups, or we worked with sociograms, or whatever. We did critical incident interviews, whatever kinds of data collection methods you used, and how long did each of those take, and how many pages of transcript were generated. So we're really seeing a profile. This is the data set. This is the data set that you will be analyzing. So that's the descriptive data section. In the data analysis procedures, I'm just highlighting two subsections that we've identified and built on from the previous version. The reflexivity protocol is an opportunity for you to talk about how to think reflectively about how you had approached the data collection and are preparing the analysis. So for example, how did you handle bias? How did you prepare yourself to handle bias? How is that exhibited in the data set? Those sorts of questions. And then we want you to put a lot of detail into the data analysis steps you actually took. So how did you go about it? We want a lot of detail here. If, for example, you're doing a thematic analysis and you have gone through first cycle coding and second cycle coding, and then you've been looking for clusters and maybe categories, and then you're doing analysis to show how themes emerged from these first step analyses. We want to see that explained. We want to see, here's transcript. Here's perhaps initially hand-coded transcript. We want to see images of that. We want to see what codes got developed, how are they defined, what are examples of them, how did you take your thinking through. In other words, we want a very robust discussion that showed step by step what you actually did. And in a sense, you might think of this as show your work. We're not just going to jump to this is what I found. Show your work. This is how I got there. That's what this section is about. The results section has been a little bit elaborated. We focused a little bit on how to present your results and what to think about in presenting the results. For example, in qualitative studies, it's important that you have a narrative thread in presenting what you have found as a result of the analysis. So rather than having, say, lists, chunk upon chunk of quotes, which kind of leaves it to the reader to figure out what you learned, we want you to have a narrative thread that said, this is what I learned, here are the patterns I found, this is how I got them, here's some examples of quotes. So that's the presenting of the results. And then we want you to actually revisit limitations. You talked about anticipated limitations in chapter 1, but here we want you to revisit limitations. Well, what actually happened? Here are limitations I think actually occurred. And you can go to the next slide, Michelle. And in this section, we've, as you can see from the purple text, added a couple of reflection sections. We've found we've been learning over time that it's very important to give you an opportunity to reflect on what you learned. All of you, as were all of us when we did our dissertations, are novice researchers. I would say most of you. Some of you may have had more research experience, but for large part. So there's always a big learning curve. Think about no plan survives its collision with reality. What did you learn? We want you to be able to talk about that, discuss it, and talk about how your understanding of this entire topic and research study changed and developed as you went through it. We then, at the end of the recommendations section, now the recommendations is already, the same as it is in version 8, but we've added a new piece where we'd like you to do a holistic reflection on the problem space. So we're going to have you look back to what you wrote in chapter 2 about the identification of the problem space, and now you're going to reflect on what work you've done and how your work drew upon that and how your work is relevant and contributed to what needed to be understood. And now, as a result of your work, what more is understood. Next slide. Here's a list of all the appendices that we have, and the ones that are bolded in purple are new appendices that we're asking you to include. You don't have to, I'm going to jump over to transcripts for a moment. You do not have to put all of your transcripts in there, but we would like to see good solid samples of your transcripts. Some learners have put all of their transcripts in an appendix, and we do accept that. Going back to the beginning though, on the 10 strategic points, we mentioned early in this presentation that we have a 10 strategic points in the front matter. By the time you get to the end of your dissertation, and that's updated to align with what you actually have, we want that 10 strategic points pasted in to the first appendix. So that will be published along in the dissertation. We want an appendix on instruments, protocols, and permissions. So this is, here's my interview protocol. Here are all my interview questions. Here are the instruments or protocols that I use to collect the data. And although it is less common in qualitative studies to have permissions from other authors to use their instruments, because instruments in qualitative studies tend to be uniquely developed for that study. Sometimes other instruments might be used, and in which case we want to see the permission for its use. We want to see your code book. As I mentioned, the transcripts. We want to have you really go through we have a feasibility and benefits checklist that we've included. We've also included the last three bolded items here are really supportive to you, and they're really resources to you in the template. So the strategies to establish trustworthiness accompanies the trustworthiness section earlier in the template, and it's a graphic that shows you what kind of strategies fit to what approaches to trustworthiness that we think you'll find useful. We have put in a wonderful guide on developing qualitative interviews. I think you'll find this enormously helpful. It's an outline form, but even though it's an outline form and not a big narrative, I think you're going to really want to jump to that. And I think it'll help you a great deal as you are in your proposal phase developing interview questions. And finally, we've provided sample frames, expectations for duration, and transcripts. So these are a couple of tables to give you some expectations on really what our minimum requirements are for how long your interview should be and what we would expect transcribed pages to be. Those are never, by the way, solid. You know, you might have an hour-long interview and you might have somebody who talks really fast, or you might have someone who talks really slowly, and you might get a different number of pages out of that. But that's why it's not strict, but we're looking for minimums. And the reason that we provide that is as a support to you, that we want to ensure that you have a sufficient data set that you'll really be able to analyze. Next slide, please. Here are some, not a complete list, but some key items in the APA 7th edition. The way the headings work, so heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, look different in the APA edition, and in a minute we'll look at the next slide where we provided a little sample of that. There's one space after a period or the terminal punctuation of a sentence. The figure caption has changed. If any of you are already working in one of the templates in version 8, you'll know that the caption for some kind of a graphic is placed below the figure. Not so in APA 7th. The caption is placed above the figure, much the way the table title is for a table. It's going to be, you know, it's going to, quote, look the same, but it's going to be styled differently. It's going to be styled as a caption. Whereas the one for a table is, quote, styled as what we call a table title. I'll just give you a little hint that the really important thing about that is that Word, quote, reads these styles. And so when Word reads something that's styled caption, when you update your list of figures, it's going to include the title and the page number for that figure. Same thing with the table. So, but the big change just on the formatting for the figure caption is that it goes above the figure. There are a few changes in the reference list. You do not need to use the retrieved from for a website unless there's a date included. DOI now needs to say doi.org/ and then the numbers of the DOI. Cities and states are now removed from the publication. So if it's like, you know, the history of the world, 1990, McGraw-Hill in, you know, such and such a city, don't include the city and don't include the state. You just include the publisher. There's new sections in APA 7th edition about citing online sources, so I want you to know that that's there. And in the reference section, you will list up to 20 authors. It used to be 6, and then you go ... and then you'd list the final author. Now you're going to list up to 20 if there are that many authors on a piece. a difference in the in-text citations, as you're probably aware, if there are 3 authors, you would go Smith, Jones, and Smith 2020, and the next time you'd cite them, it would be Smith et al. 2020. Now, you will use the et al. From the very first citation. That's new. There are new guidelines in APA 7th edition regarding bias-free language. So that's something like, instead of his, hers, she, he, you use them or their. So that's an important section to look at. There are some places where GCU has overridden some APA styles. Not much. We've been pretty close to APA, but please, we want you to follow the template. And we're pretty well APA 7th edition compliant here. But if you have a question of how would I handle this, please look at the template. Note too that the GCU library has resources and has been offering webinars themselves on APA 7th, and we urge you to purchase a hard copy of the APA manual. Next slide. This is a little bit little to look at, but these are examples of what the new headings look like. Now, heading 1 is actually the same. It's centered and it's bold, and the text starts at a new paragraph. Heading 2 is also what it's been before, on its own line with text and new paragraph. Where it changes are these following headings. Heading 3 used to be on the same line as the text in the paragraph, but now it too is on its own separate line. As you can see, flush left, bold, and italic, and the text in the new paragraph starts in a new paragraph. Heading 4 is the text is on the same line, and I want to hope that I did heading 5 here correctly with the text in the new paragraph, but as you can see, it's also indented, bold and italic, so you might want to just double check that one. We don't get too many heading 5s in there, but we definitely get a lot through heading 4, and I think that's my final slide, Dr. Sandoval. There we go. So I'm imagining that I haven't been looking at the Q&A as I've been presenting, but I'm thinking that our team here has been answering questions, and if any of our panelists see questions that you want to answer live, just feed them to me or to Dr. Bainbridge.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Yeah, thanks Dr. Chess, and thank you everyone. There was a lot of information covered in this webinar, and I know that many of you have really detailed questions about specific sections and chapters within the template. So given that this is our introduction to the template, we needed to cover sort of the broad overview of the big changes in the template. And we will be having additional webinars in September and October that will go into more detailed template support webinars that will go into more detail within each of these chapters. So look for those webinars coming up in September and October. We also have a quantitative webinar that will be a similar format to this on Thursday. So if you're really hungry for additional information and want to jump into that webinar, please sign up. We also have a webinar for our dissertation chairs. I know we have some on the call today. So next week we have that webinar for the chairs and our committee members to attend if they would like to help them understand and know what to look for in the new template. A couple questions have popped up, and I'll address it, generally a few of them that have come along the way. A lot of questions about the prospectus template. And so we are not updating the prospectus template at this time. So if you're working in your prospectus, continue to do so. And our curriculum with the prospectus continues to stay the same. The elements of the prospectus really align with different sections of the chapter 3. So that's why we have you build out that framework first, and then you'll work your prospectus into your dissertation proposal, and primarily with a lot of that information transitioning over into chapter 3. So you do not need to worry about the prospectus. We've had a lot of questions about the PowerPoint, the defense PowerPoints. And several of you have indicated you're getting ready to do your defense. So use the current defense PowerPoint template The changes to that template will probably be pretty minor. So don't wait for a new template to come out. Just go ahead and use the existing one. And if you have your 10 strategic points, again, you don't need to change your 10 strategic points either. I mean, the information in the 10 strategic points, we just split out some of the information in the 10 points so that it's a little bit more qual specific and a little more quant specific. Dr. Chess?
I see a question about, can we start on this new template now, or if we're not at level 2, or do we have to wait till January 2021? You can start now. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No problem. Please do.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't wait. Start now. And we do have some questions about, well, I'm working in, Kevin Norton, actually, I'll do a shout out to you, Kevin. You asked, you're working in version 8, but can I simply add a couple of, or some of the new material to enhance my work in version 8? And I actually had another question about that in terms of the, no plan survives a collision with reality section that Dr. Chess was referring to. And yes, if you're in version 8 and you see some additional areas that you would like to add, that's fine. Just keep your section headings and your, all of your headings in place, and you can add a subsection in on that reflection piece. There's a lot of things, but to strengthen the writing and your template, you're in version 8. But the main thing is, if you're working in version 8, you have to use the format and the structure of version 8. And if you're working in version 9, you can't blend the two. So don't do that. Don't do a mind meld of your dissertation templates. So work in one or the other. And again, as a reminder, everyone, if you're currently working on your proposal and you expect that you're going to be in level 2 review in the near term, you certainly can stay within the version 8 template. You do not need to transition over. And if you are expecting that you're not going to get your proposal done by January and in level 2 review, then definitely consider moving over into the new template. And I'm just going to have Dr. Sandoval talk a little bit about that for a second, because I know she's had a couple learners that have already done that as well, is actually worked and transitioned into the new template. Michelle, you want to speak to that for a second?
To moving from one section to the other, or from one template to the other. You will need to pay attention to the rubric criteria in each of the tables, but most of the sections, with the same names, you'll be able to move over, but you have to make sure that you're only copying the text that are under the level 2 headings. You don't want to copy any of the headings over. That's what will kind of mess up the formatting in the template. So for example, if you have the theoretical foundation section in version 8 and you want to move that over to version 9, copy everything under those level 2 headings right into version 9 in the theoretical foundation section. If you have questions about what to copy where, you should talk to your chair, because there are certain sections, they might be named differently, they may look a little bit different, some of the criteria may be different, but in essence, the actual sections, they're there, they just might be in a different spot. So definitely don't try to do it by yourself. If you have questions, talk to your chair and get some help.
We have an important question. Transcripts will be removed before publishing in ProQuest, right? If the transcripts are in the appendix, and they will carry through to publication. So anything that you would add as a transcript in an appendix, whether it's sample transcripts or more than that, they should be redacted so that you protect the confidentiality of the participant. If you have a situation in which, and Dr. Garrett, you might want to jump in on this with IRB, but if you have a situation where you had a particularly small sample size and people might even be able to figure out where it is, and transcripts would be compromising confidentiality, then we have another story. Dr. Garrett?
I would agree with that.
Okay.
That you don't want to put them in if people can tell who if there's any possibility that someone can tell who it is, then you don't want to include the transcripts.
We have a good question from Dawn Marie, and I'll just address you. It's kind of a four-part question about the project timeline. Can it be listed in bullets? And we specifically left that open-ended to have you as a learner work with your chair to determine the best way to present your project timeline, but definitely you can present it in a bulleted list format. We also have the dissertation milestone table on the DC network, and that's a nice way to put together a timeline and build out some different elements of your what you're going to accomplish over in your project and when that's going to occur. So that's something that you should work with your chair on. And there's a number of resources around project planning and timeline. There's so many resources out there that are free that would help you build a project timeline. And so you want to explore that. We're also actually exploring one in particular that we might consider recommending for our doctoral learners. But again, there's so many different ways to do project planning that we didn't specifically put a set of guidelines around that. The tables and figures in the template are there as examples, and you should remove those out as you work through the template and insert your own work. Those were intended to give you some guidelines around how to properly format a table and how to properly format a figure. And then also the final question, I think it was important for all of you. If you're going to transition your work over and you've been working from version 8 to version 9, and you're working with your committee, the question was, should I show the revisions from version 8 and perhaps feedback from my committee? And you definitely need to work with your chair on this, but I would say that as you transition sections over, you definitely should retain those revisions and that feedback, because it's important for your committee members to see where they are in the review process with you and the feedback they've provided and how you've addressed that feedback as well. So great question, Dawn Marie. Thank you for that.
We have a question from Joseph. Is it at the proposal stage that we get the green signal or approval to go ahead with the methodology leading to qualitative or quantitative? Actually, you'll be making the decision about qualitative or quantitative before the proposal, because you're going to need to work with your committee on which methodology seems most appropriate for your proposed study. And then you will use that particular template that aligns with that methodology.
Okay.
Diana asks, we no longer do a proposal, we just do a dissertation. Actually, you do a proposal. We simply have not created a separate proposal template. The proposal is constituted by the first 3 chapters of the current dissertation template. So you'll work on those 3 chapters. That will be your proposal. So you still go through the proposal stage. You still defend your proposal. That is still a requirement.
We had a question about using APA 7 in the regular classes, and the university is transitioning to APA 7.0 overall as an institution in the fall, and so you will start to see that occurring, a gradual transition. The library is offering, GCU library is offering some webinars on APA 7, so we encourage you to go to the Student Success Center, access some of the resources there, and also the library to access those webinars. I have not had a chance to attend, but I've heard they're very good. All right, we have other questions. Is there any other one that we want to hit before we wrap up the webinar? It's 4:10. We're actually 10 minutes over our allotted time, so we want to make sure everybody can get back to their work and evening activities and things like that.
Heather asks, so if we're at data collection, do we need to move to the new template? The answer is no. If you're already at data collection, you're in version 8, you stay there. And you would stay with APA 6, which is in that version. And by the way, if any of you are in version 8 and you were very proactive and you decided to start using APA 7, okay, we will permit that, but please work with your committee and chair. We don't really want a mixed model of 6th and 7th in any one, so you're kind of going to go all or nothing.
Okay. Again, we have a question about updating appendices and things like that. appendices are one of those things that if you want to add appendices into your current version 8, talk to your chair, because those are things that if an appendix is relevant to your study, some of the appendices that Dr. Chess covered as part of the qualitative are very applicable even in the existing template. But those are things that, talk with your chair. We have required appendices because we want to see your informed consent document. We would like to see your IRB approval letter from the IRB. We need to see that site authorization. But those additional appendices are certainly something that you would want to talk to your chair about, particularly for version 8.
I want to just re-emphasize this period, the January 29th date. If you are in version 8 now, which I assume you all are since we only put out version 9 yesterday, and you have already gone through any AQR, you can stay in version 8. That rule holds true right through the end of day on January 29th, 2021. But if you have not really started in the proposal yet, we strongly encourage you to start with the version 9 because of the enhancements that we've made. But if you're well down the road of your journey and you've already been to AQR, and you might even be in what we call level 5 or the full dissertation AQR, stay in your version 8 template.
That's a great point. There's a little bit of confusion around that. So if, again, and Dr. Chess, great advice, if you're just starting your proposal, then definitely use the version 9 template, right? If you're well underway with your proposal and expect to be in level 2 review soon, and you're using the version 8, continue to use the version 8, no problem. However, you're welcome to switch. I mean, it's just, again, you need to just make sure that you're using one versus the other, okay? We have that great big window for transition all the way through January. So use that how you see fit. That's really important. And I did have a question. There's still a proposal template on the DC network. Yes, that proposal template is still up there because some of you are currently using that template, again, in version 8, and we won't take that version of the proposal template down until January. So that's a version 8. We just basically cut off the four chapters 4 and 5 for the proposal template for that particular version, but we're not doing that for the version 9. You'll have the dissertation template, work in that for your proposal, and then just submit that. And if you have extra chapters that have, information, those chapters are there, but there's no information in them yet because you haven't conducted your study, that's fine. Or your chair may say, hey, lob off those chapters 4 and 5 until you actually go collect your data and write them up. So we're just not having a separate proposal template for version 9, right? We want you to work in the one document. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, well, we have a lot of great questions, and again, you're welcome to attend the webinar on Thursday, should you like to attend that one. And it'll be a little quantitative focus, but we'll cover much of the same information for clarification. We'll be holding additional dissertation template learner support webinars in the coming months, so look for those invitations. Take some time to carefully read the template. I think you'll find a lot of your questions will be answered once you delve into the content of the template. We'll continue to provide updates and information on the DC network. And I really want to thank all of our panelists today for attending and answering all of the questions. We've had a lot come through the Q&A. So thank you to Drs. Garrett, Garcia, Lonker, and to Dr. Sandoval for driving today. We appreciate that. Dr. Chess for an excellent presentation. I really appreciate the depth that you went into with each of the chapters. And to all of you out there, please stay safe and stay healthy. And we're happy that you took time out of your schedules today to be at our webinar. So with that, we'll go ahead and log off. And for questions that are unanswered in the chat, we'll try to pull out those questions and develop a Q&A document that we can post onto the DC network as we see the common questions that come across.